4th of July weekend brings the second round of racing here at the Upper Peninsula International Raceway, and tonight it's Saykley's Candies Veterans Night. Hi, I'm Todd Rose here with the Rose Racing Report, and what a scorcher of a day we have on our hands. It's 85, 90 degrees out here, and we are all looking for shade as the sun is beating down on the racetrack. But as that starts to set and we get closer to race time, we should be much cooler and much better off. Last week, opening night here at the racetrack was full of exciting and clean racing in all the divisions, but one of the races that really caught my attention, the Sport Modified feature sponsored by Binks Coca-Cola, where Logan Fleischman stole the win on the last lap away from Pat Ritchie in a photo finish. We hope to see more of that kind of racing here tonight, and if the racing on the track is as hot and heavy as this weather is, it's going to be one heck of a night. We'll have the highlights just ahead for you on the Rose Racing Report. The Riverside Auto Group Youth Micro Sprints came out for the first feature of the night, and it would set the tone for the features to follow. Lap 1, turn 1, Ethan Mannanen made an incredible move on the outside, but just as quick found himself in the infield and out of the race. On the restart, Carl Worm would follow Mannanen's path to the infield and out of the race as well. For the second week in a row, the Worm family was in for a night of rotten luck. After the restart, racing heated up between the top three as Liam and Brody Steinhauer showed the way with Griffin Iverson in third. Liam would look to the outside, and Griffin to the inside would take it 3 wide down the back straightaway. But just as soon, the yellow flag would fly once again for Tanner Hansen, slowing on the back straightaway. In the closing laps, Liam Steinhauer pulled away, but it wasn't smooth sailing as he almost lost it in turn 4 coming to the checkered flag. Liam would take the win, Griffin Iverson followed in second, and Caleb Worm in third. Dave Hosking and Luke Lobb led the Sportsman Micro Sprint feature to the green flag for what turned out to be one of the night's most exciting races. Lap 1 was full of 2 and 3 wide action as Luke Lobb would pull away from the snarling mess of cars behind him. Hosking, who you might remember rolled over last week in turn 4, got off to a strong start in the second position, but Trevor Noem would find his way to the outside and take the spot away from him. The battles weren't over for Hosking, though, as Brett Lobb and Drake Dagnan looked to both sides of the number 99 for the third position. Trouble would find Hosking just a few laps later as his car would slow on the front stretch. Dagnan and Brett Lobb would split him as he went high in turn number 1 and eventually out of the race. Back up front, Trevor Denome had caught leader Luke Lobb. Denome would make his way to the lead on the inside, but it would be short-lived. As Denome tried to make his way around Jeffrey Lash, the two would make contact. Denome sent into the infield, then airborne, then into the path of Lash, pirouetting in the air before rolling upside down. Both drivers were uninjured. While Lash climbed from his machine, Denome miraculously drove his back to the pits. After the restart, Luke Lobb would head back to the lead and bring home the win with Drake Dagnan second and Brett Lobb third. Kevin Worm jumped to the early lead in the Getchell Builders 600 Micro Sprint feature as the rest of the field jockeyed for position behind him. As the field began to space themselves out just a bit, the battle for third began to heat up between Matt Peterson and Greg Bryak. Peterson would take the spot, then move to second around Dennis Ness with Greg Bryak in lockstep. Suddenly, Peterson slowed on the back straightaway. From second to a stop, Peterson was out of the race. Then, Kevin Worm, having issues while leading for the second week in a row, pulled off the track from the lead with a leak spotted by officials. Then, Robert Buttry would head off track as well. For Worm and Buttry, they were both able to return, but would be mired in traffic for the rest of the race. In his second week back in action, Greg Bryak brought home the win, with Scott Ritchie and Tony Beauchamp rounding out the podium positions. The Vintage Modifieds were up next on the card with Jesse Denome and Alan Yell leading the field to green. Denome would slide out of turn 4, allowing Scott Dagnan to take the lead, as Denome continued to struggle with handling issues early in the race. A caution for Dave Broders brought the field to a slow, but back to green. Degnan took over as the leader once again with Denome and Valaket behind. On the final lap, the leaders came into the battle of Charles Peterson and Alan Yell, allowing Jesse Denome to take one last lunge for the win, but it wouldn't be enough. Degnan would take the win with Denome and Valaket across the line in second and third. The ANL Iron and Metal Street Stock feature was full of action from the drop of the green flag. Tyler Corwin would lead the race early, pulling a train that stretched to 5th place behind him. Unlike a real train, this one was off the rails from beginning to end. Paul Wagner, Eric Mathieson, Ron Jenchak, and Billy Bowden all looking for ways to gain a spot and make their way to the front of the field. The tightly packed racing, as it usually does, led to some contact. Paul Wagner took a trip to the infield off the front bumper of Eric Mathieson. Mathieson would move to second, but only for a short time as Ron Jenchak made his way under the 27 laps later. As had been the theme of the night, trouble would find leader Tyler Corwin. Corwin would slow off of turn 2, allowing Jenchak to take the top spot. Mathieson and Wagner followed suit. As Corwin slowed, he would drop into the infield. Luckily for him, bad luck would strike Billy Bowden almost simultaneously. Bowden lost his right front wheel in turn 3, taking him out of the race and effectively turning his car into a dirt plow. After a strong start in Week 1, Week 2 ended on a very sour note for the 2019 UPIR track champion. Another exciting last lap was in store for fans as Jenchak slipped high in turn 1. Wagner would take the look to the inside but was unable to make the move stick. Wagner took one last jab in turn 3, but it would be all Ron Jenchak for the win. Tyler Corwin would recover from his issues to follow Wagner in third place. For the second week in a row, the Binks Coca-Cola Sport Modifieds would put on one entertaining race. Jeff Solomon and Brett Wittes led the field to green, but breathing down their necks was Matt Valaket. Valaket would begin his attack on the exit of turn 2, moving to the inside of Solomon. The three-car battle for the lead sandwiched Solomon between Valaket and Wittes. Valaket down the front straightaway and into turn number 1 would take the lead, and Jamie Iverson would follow him under Solomon and into second. One of the only incidents in the feature came laps later when Lonnie Dalgord would get into the back of Mike Ritchie entering turn number 3. Ritchie's car would spin around in a 360 and come to a stop as the yellow flag flew. Dalgord would be sent to the back for causing the accident. On the restart, Pat Ritchie, last week's runner-up, slowed and exited the track in turn 1. Night over. The car to watch became Lonnie Dalgord as he began to claw his way back through the field, while Matt Valaket and Jamie Iverson pulled away up front. Dalgord hooked his car up on the high line to make his way around Rick Gustafson, and then Mike Ritchie. Valaket, however, up front would take the win with Jamie Iverson following in second. Brett Wittes was third. Dalgord recovered from his issues to finish in fourth. The final race of the night belonged to the Sport Compacts. For Lowen Raridan, it couldn't be over soon enough. Lap 1, Raridan and Ryan Tim came together, sending Raridan spinning. Then on the restart, Raridan and Wayne Corwin would slam doors, sending Raridan into the infield and severing his bumper. But it wasn't over yet, as Raridan would stop out of turn 4 with a trail of fluid following him. Track crews would have an impromptu bonfire in turn 4 to clean up the fluid. On the ensuing restart, Alex Constantino would lead the field back to the green flag. But just as soon as they got going again, issues for Ryan Tim would slow the field one more time, as Tim's car would slow in turns 1 and 2 and come to a stop at the outer edge of the racetrack. A nudge into turn 1 from Matt Adams on the final restart was as close as anyone could get to Alex Constantino all night. For the second week in a row, Constantino was the first across the line, with Adams in second and Wayne Corwin coming home in third.
As the city of Escanaba celebrates Independence Day weekend, we close up Saykley's Candies Veterans Night here at the Upper Peninsula International Raceway. and what turned out to be one of the craziest racing nights in recent memory. Not only were leaders having issues, but other front runners were having issues, and the racing was just unpredictable from start to finish. Of course, we saw the big accident with Trevor Denome and Jeffrey Lash, both drivers, of course, okay, and Trevor even drove the car back to the pits, which, how that thing even rolled, I'm not sure. But everybody's okay, which is the main thing, and the racing was exciting and clean. But for this week, we bring it to a close as the mosquitoes begin to come out. For Todd Rose and the Rose Racing Report, we'll see you next week.